Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. Legend himself, Frankie Dettori. Ciao, Frankie. Tutto a posto.
Tutto a posto. Yes, that's a good start. So you haven't lost your Italian.
Frankie Dettori, legend, world-class jockey, one of the best ever to sit in the saddle, ambassador to the sport of kings. Meet Frankie during his fanfare like never before, only on Past the Wire TV.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Past the Wire TV. I'm John Stettin. I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Metz, who is out in California, I believe.
And that's correct. Yes.
It is the first edition of the 2023 Past the Wire Kentucky Derby Radar Show. We will be watching the Contenders and the Pretenders from now up until the first Saturday in May when they have the run for the roses, and we'll see how we do and what progresses. A lot changes from week to week now. You know, we've got the preps underway, the Risen Star, one of the bigger points races coming up this Saturday. What's your take on the early Derby horses? Anybody you know sticking out to you yet?
I would say my top two that I really like are Rocket Can and Arabian Night. Those two have really impressed me so far.
Okay, you know, interesting. I think Arabian Night, in my opinion, is you know really looking like the potentially special horse in the crop. You know, what's going to happen with, you know, the Bob Baffert situation? Are they going to move him to another trainer to run in the Derby, then back to Bob? He's lightly raced, inexperienced. Maybe he doesn't even run in the Derby. I don't know. Certainly looks good enough to off his victory in the Southwest. But I don't know that we really know what's going to happen with him. Belmonte's horse who won at Gulfstream, I was impressed with, came back good. You know, he's a horse that's definitely shown a lot of improvement once they've stretched him out. You know, Rocket Can, but you know, other than Arabian Night, nobody to me has really jumped up and wowed me. And
another one of my top picks is Forte, but you know we haven't seen him crank up just yet. So
yeah, and you know Forte, he checks all the boxes for sure. And you know his last couple of races and his race in the Breeders' Cup was really good, but we haven't seen him back. And you know historically, the Breeders' Cup juvenile winner very seldom comes back and wins the Kentucky Derby for whatever reason. Maybe that's coincidence. I'm not, you know, overly into stats and things like that, but you know, maybe there's something to the fact that when you've got to go that hard to win a race like that late in the year as a 2-year-old, maybe it sets you back a little bit coming back in the development aspect. What's your take on that race and that not being such a productive Derby winning race as far as the winners goes from a trainer perspective?
This is my opinion, personal trainer, whatever you want to call it. But I think the reason that that's been such a jinx is, the Breeders' Cup juvenile winner, who's often the 2-year-old champion, is up against it. But I think, what happens is when you got a 20-horse field and you got a one-shot deal, I think that's what makes it so tough and so elusive. It's not that they haven't done well, they've run seconds or thirds, but what happens is when you just compare straight, one shot, one time, that's where I think the numbers start to shy away from that. But, he's in very capable hands of Todd Pletcher. I'm sure, all these top trainers, Baffert, Pletcher, Brad Cox now on the scene, as well as Asmussen, they're gearing towards those Triple Crown races. And they've got, all of them are loaded with top prospects this year. And then Belmonte, who just continues to do great things. So I think, you got some of these horses that are, like you said, they're going to sort themselves out as we go over the next couple of weeks and couple of months. But I think they've given Forte time, let him recover from his 2-year-old season, and now they can kind of get him to a peak as a trainer would, and for that crescendo the first Saturday in May. And that's where I think Todd's going to lean towards that. He's going to point for that race and work backwards.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Maybe 1 or 2 starts, I would guess, before the Derby. If anybody can do that, it would be Todd. I got to see him come back. You know what I mean? I've got to see him come back before I'm really ready to jump on board with a horse like that. We haven't, like you said, we haven't seen him back. So we'll see. Now, interestingly, at the fairgrounds on Saturday, Harlocap runs. He is the first of the Bob Baffert horses to apparently transfer to another barn to run in a Derby points race. They changed the Triple Crown nomination language this year to force owners to move their horses by February 28th. It's February 16th today. So, Harlocap runs in the Risen Star for Steve Asmussen. Whether or not he goes back to Bob after the race, I guess, remains to be seen. But, he falls into a category for me. When we look this far out, it's February. We're looking at a race the first Saturday in May. Normally, I wouldn't do that, but the Breeders' Cup, we like to look early. The Derby, it's fun to kind of identify these, horses early and see how they fare. One of the things, or 2 of the things that I look for that most people don't. Most people are looking for the horses and they put right on their radar, horses that just ran a bang-up race. Hit Show, for example, who just ran that, monster race in the, the Withers at Aqueduct. Now is all of a sudden on everybody's list, I look for horses that are progressing going forward and have not yet run that big or peak race. Harlocap fits into that mold. He had a very troubled trip 2 starts back, then broke his maiden relatively easily, now moves into stakes, and I think is ready to take a step forward and show that he belongs among the better 3-year-olds. The other thing that I look for, and I'll cite another Baffert horse, and it's interesting because he's got so many this year that look like they can be, Derby types and Derby contenders. But Faustin, that great curling, who we talked about on an earlier show, that's a horse to me that looks like he's just got improved with distance written all over him, in my view, as a handicapper, a horse player, and student of the game. So those are the kind of horses I more or less gravitate to. So I'm very curious to see how Harlocap runs on Saturday in the Risen Star. Curly Jack, Instant Coffee, Victory Formation, those kind of horses have all run well, but to me, they all seem a little bit slow for what I like to see, especially on like thoroughgraph numbers and things like that, for me to get very, very excited about them. So I don't know, your take on anybody in the Risen Star?
You know, you touched on Faust in there, and I think that I agree with you. We obviously there's tons of room for improvement. He ran a good race, and I think as the distances get longer, is only going to get better. So yeah, I really don't have an opinion in the Risen Star, but I was going to ask you about one horse, Victory Formation. What's your thoughts on him?
Oh, well, you know, he's one, like I mentioned, he's got a lot of hype because he ran that race, and I'll look at it in a second so I can quote it accurately. He ran that race at Oaklawn Park, the Smarty Jones. Okay. To me, it was a walk the dog, waltz on the lead kind of race that looks a lot better visually and on paper than it really, really was. You know, when a quality or decent 3-year-old at this time of the year, you know, gets the lead by himself, stretching out against some horses that aren't really, you know, stretch out types or haven't gone long yet, and he, you know, has a rider like Pratt on him, you know, 23 and change, 47 and change, almost 48, 112 and change, 138 with the short finish at Oaklawn. I don't get excited about that at this time of year. I more gravitate to saying, you know what, at 60 cents to $1, he did what he was supposed to do. The race looks better than it is. Overrated, short price, bet against going forward, or look to beat going forward when things really get tough and dicey, and he's got to, you know, tussle on the front end and run a lot faster for a little bit longer against maybe better horses in order to get it done. So a horse like that, you know, I look to bet against, and you know, I look for, you know, more improving type horses and different types of patterns on the thoroughgraph.
But that makes me ask the question. You know, Arabian Night, he had a very similar race. He got a little bit of pressure, but he really just skated along. It was a wet track, and he just did what he was supposed to do at his odds. And my question to you is, how did the numbers come back, thoroughgraph wise?
He ran
fast.
Numbers. Yeah, well, I would look at thoroughgraph. He ran faster than Victory Formation, I believe. But
I guess my question is he one you would look towards, or would you bet against next time?
no, he's one that I look towards. See, the difference between Victory Formation and him to me was he had one start where Victory Formation had two. He was a little bit more green, I think, and was learning a little bit more. He also caught some adversity in a very sloppy track that Victory Formation didn't catch. So, you know, to me, he just showed more signs that I would look for, or that I would recognize as something that might be a little bit special, or a little bit of a cut above the you know, regular Derby horse. And all the Derby horses are good. I'm not a big believer in that weak crop, good crop talk that a lot of people, you know, tend to gravitate to. I think all these top 3-year-olds for this particular year are good. You know, if they weren't, they wouldn't be the top 3-year-olds and be on the Derby trail.
And there's one thing that I'll point out too, maybe from a trainer's perspective, or something that some people think about and some people don't. But a horse like Arabian Night, who only had one start, the point I want to make is when these horses ship out of town, they don't have their home track. They're not running out of their stall that they're used to. So they have to get on a plane and ship. They run at unfamiliar surroundings. And when they don't get flustered, like nervous in the paddock, or, you know, sweaty in the post parade, and the track surface is different, sometimes they're getting more mud kicked in their face than they're used to, or it's a deeper track, whatever it may be. I think when these horses ship and still perform, I think that really bodes well for down the road when they've handled that before. It's kind of like, you know, always playing home games, and you're never used to playing away because you're in a different hotel and everything that goes with it.
I agree. And, you know, victory formation will check a lot of those boxes because he's had 3 starts. He's won at Keeneland, he's won at Churchill, he's won at Oaklawn. And when he won at Oaklawn, he was training at the fairgrounds, went to Oaklawn, won the Smarty Jones, now he's going back to the fairgrounds, where Brad Cox is winning at a ridiculous 43%. You know, that's just gaudy. You know,
he just keeps getting loaded with more and more horses, and you know, and they're performing.
yeah, you know, yeah. So, you know, he's going back to his home track, working good after the race, but still, even though he had the 3 wins over the 3 different tracks, you know, Arabian Night only had the 1 start when he did it. And when I watched that race, it looked to me like at first he really was not falling in love with the sloppy track. It took him a while, it seemed to me, to really get a hold of it and adjust to it. And once he did, he kind of, you know, just showed his class and dominance, you know, down the lane, and just really caught my eye as one who might be a really, really nice racehorse. And, you know, depending on what happens with his progression and whether or not they decide to move him, you know, knowing Bob, I'm sure he's going to do what's best for the horses and for the owners, and probably if they think he's ready for the Derby, they'll say, hey, move him, you know, barring some kind of injunction or miracle where Bob can actually run in the Derby, which in Kentucky seems extremely unlikely, but you never know.
Yeah, I thought last year, you know, there was Yachtine had a horse that was favored and he got a lot of the press. I would assume that might be where they would go with some of them. But, you know, speaking of Yachtine, which sometimes I think it's the kiss of death when you get all those interviews and press and everything. It's like you already got the favorite. Now you got all these things added on, and it just invariably, you know, doesn't work out like planned. But speaking of Yachtine, he has a nice horse of his own, Practical Move, who's, you know, done good things out here on the West Coast. And he's getting a similar profile where they ran their race at Los Al. I heard they gave him a little time off, and now they're going to crank him up, as he knows how to do, because he worked under Bob Baffert and knows the routine. So he's seen it happen. He's been there to the Derby once. Now he'll know, you know, many times with Bob. But now I think, you know, a legitimate shot with his own horse, and a quality horse at that.
I agree. And it'll be interesting to see how he moves along. Another horse who kind of caught my eye a little bit that surprised me, and I love this particular angle, is the horse that won the Sam F. Davis for Pletcher, Litigate, who was really not one of Todd's high-profile horses going into the race. Stepped up and won the Sam Davis. You and I in the past have talked about horses that have run at Tampa and liked it and not liked it, and how it can be a quirky track. And I think it was a Todd Pletcher horse a couple of years ago, Known Agenda.
Whenever I see that commercial for Known Agenda as a stallion, I think of our conversation. Yeah.
Right. You know, where we kind of, you know, both agree. Now here's a horse who obviously liked the Tampa track, or maybe didn't. Maybe he won and not liking it, because he did run, you know, a very, to me, hard-ridden race. You know what I mean? Saez rode him a lot and really had to work him to get him to win. But that's the kind of race that, especially over Tampa, I think a horse can build off. And I love, like we said, I love horses coming off Tampa going to different tracks that aren't as heavy and quirky.
And we go back to that, you know, trainer jockey combinations, but not only that, but the jockey feedback. So whether it's a TVG interview, FanDuel TV now, and or maybe some notes on the stable notes afterwards, when the jockey comes back and says, boss, man, I had to ride him really hard. You know, he said he wasn't handling this track like he does down at Gulfstream, but he gave it to me. He won, but it was hard. You know, like you said, it could have been a hard, could have taken a lot out of him just because he struggled, but quality and class sometimes overrides not handling the track just because they're just much better. But yeah, definitely some of that insider information. I don't want to call it insider, but you know, you hear the jockey talking to the trainer or the interview. Hey, you know, how was your race? Well, I didn't think he was going to get there, but you know, he really gave it to me late. And even though he didn't like the track, he still ran hard. So some of those little nuances, or like in the case of Known Agenda back in the day, he kept getting stuck down inside. He didn't like the dirt in his face. He didn't seem to run into it. But when he got a clear trip, he won by like 15 that day.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right now, the road to the Kentucky Derby on the points is Forte, Instant Coffee, Rocket Can, Hit Show, Litigate, Curly Jack, Blazing Sevens, Arctic Arrogance, Jace's Road, and Red Route 1. Victory Formation is a number 11. Practical Move, the horse you mentioned, is a number 13. So I'm going to give a quick rundown. And obviously none of Bob's horses are on here yet because they haven't earned any points. So you know, Harlocap, we'll find out on Saturday where he gets any points for Asmussen. Arabian Night didn't get any for the his victory in the Southwest, but Forte, I think we can agree, is a contender. Instant Coffee, number 2. To me, he hasn't run fast enough yet for me to call him a contender. I don't care who trains him or what the situation is. I need to see more, even though he's Brad Cox. Rocket Can, I'm going to call a contender. Hit Show, I'm going to call a pretender, even off that big win in the Withers, only because he's going to need to show me he can maintain that kind of form and run that kind of race again and continue to go forward, as opposed to being a horse that just ran his race, too soon. Litigate, to me, definitely one that I look for to, go forward. Curly Jack, I'm going to call him a pretender as well. A lot of people like him. He ran some good races as a 2-year-old. We'll see what he does at 3. Hasn't run fast enough, in my opinion, yet to really stamp himself as a contender. That could change. We're early out. Blazing Sevens, Chad Brown's horse, hasn't come back yet as a 3-year-old. Chad's patient. He's really a question mark because we don't know where he is or what he's going to do. But, if he comes back in points for the Derby, I will say this. I think that early voting won the Preakness, but I think that last year, Chad Brown didn't win the Derby with Zandon. And I think we found out as the year went on that Zandon was just maybe a cut below, Epicenter, at least last year, and some of the other contenders. But I think Chad brought Zandon and early voting up to the Derby and the Preakness as good as any trainer I've ever seen bring horses up to those 2 races. So if he puts Blazing Sevens on the trail, or anybody he puts on the trail, I'm going to call him a contender because I've got that much respect for him as a horseman and what he does. And if he thinks his horse is right, he's not going to bring a horse over or point a horse for a race that they don't belong in. So, Blazing Sevens is a question mark. We'll see him. Arctic Arrogance, to me, hasn't shown he's there yet. Jace's Road, Red Route 1, to me, not yet. And Victory Formation, I'll go down as far as 11. Hasn't shown me yet. So out of the top 11, I've got Forte, Rocket Can, Litigate, and potentially Blazing Sevens as 4 potential contenders, and I've got the rest as of today pretenders in my book. And again, we've got no Bob horses on there.
That's where I was going to go. Was of the horses that you've seen of Baffert's that have run, who would you put on that contender list of his contingent?
Arabian Night for sure. Faustin, even though no points, hasn't done that kind of running yet for sure. Harazi, I want to say his name correctly. I forgive me for not. That horse just looks like, despite that ridiculous price tag, because a lot of times those price tags don't turn out. He looks like one that even with that price tag can turn out. And he's just got such a deep bench and starting lineup this year that I don't know. I mean, even Reincarnate, the one that won at a big price that nobody expected to win, one of the preps a couple of weeks ago. That was one of those classic scenarios. What did Bob have, like 4 in the race? And that was the one that nobody thought could win at 15 or 16 to 1, myself included. After the race, when he won, I went back and looked at the PPs, and it was a classic horse player stereotype. Jeff, he looked so good to me after the race. After the race, the PP, I'm like, how did I not think this horse was a contender?
Yeah.
I think it's now.
It's tough when you got 4 out of 4 and they're all quality. Another one, well, obviously Newgate is not going to be on the trail, so that was a bummer, but he was a quality one, and but he'll be back, I'm sure. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how these horses shift and what happens with the courts and what happens, but it's going to happen fast because the deadlines are coming and the points. Obviously, like you said, you hate when they run those big super races 1 or 2 before, because sometimes they bounce, and you hate to bounce when it's the big day. And it's funny that how the big point races, as you get closer to the Derby, there's more points. So it's basically a win and you're in. But a horse like Forte, who's got his points, he's going to make it. Now they can really take their time and ease into that race, where sometimes these guys have to shoot their big shot to get into the race, and then it hurts them come Derby day.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because coming from a trainer, I think that's so important, and people miss that. Handicappers, bettors, fans don't realize what you just pointed out. Because to me, the horses that win the Derby are the ones that get the trip, get the setup, get a little bit lucky, during the running of the race, avoiding some trouble in traffic, and who are ready to peak on that day. And it's very difficult to peak in one of the key preps. And I'll say the Arkansas Derby, Wood Memorial, Bluegrass, Florida Derby's got enough time out, but even still, any of those big major preps, Louisiana Derby, to peak there, to get yourself in, and then come back and repeat that kind of race as a young 3-year-old, often going 1.25 miles for the first time, is a big ask. You know what I mean? And I think it takes away the point system. The only knock I have on it, it takes a little bit away from the master horsemanship of bringing a horse along to peak on that first Saturday in May, because now you're under pressure to get those points, where, like you said, Forte, to me, has a tremendous advantage because he doesn't have to win any of the preps. Todd can use those to set him up to peak on that first Saturday in May, and that gives him a tremendous advantage, because he can fire that shot.
Exactly. And you see it with sporting teams all the time. They win the wild card to get in, but then they're drained and injuries and everything that goes along with it. So, but no, I think it's definitely going to be an exciting year, because I agree with you. Some years you have a real standout, but this year I think any of these horses could actually take a step forward, improve. And I think they're going to have a full field of 20 as usual. And you're going to have a lot of horses that have a shot. You're going to have a few that are a little lower odds, but there's going to be some where you could make a case for quite a few of them.
Right. And I also think this is the kind of year, I mean, we haven't seen Loggins yet. I don't know if he's going to make the Derby or not, but this is also the kind of year that, to me, there could be a horse out there that nobody's talking about yet, that's really under the radar. Maybe just broke his maiden, maybe didn't even break, but hasn't really emerged. It's the kind of year where somebody all of a sudden can jump up off an allowance race, off a maiden race, and run in one of those big stakes, and wow, where'd this guy come from? And all of a sudden there's a new serious contender on the first Saturday in May. It looks like the year, like one of those years where somebody can really jump up and say, hello, everybody, I'm here too, and wind up in the gate that nobody's talking about right now.
It's kind of like what you mentioned about getting the perfect setup of everything. And 2 horses that come to mind are Mind That Bird and Rich Strike. I mean, when you go back and watch the replays or the overview or the head on, I mean, everything just parted like the Red Sea as they're going along. It just was like, it was their day, and both of them came back and they hit the board and we're like, okay, yeah, they hit the board against top levels. So it wasn't a total fluke, but that's how lucky you have to be in a field of 20, because in the United States, we're not used to running in fields of 20. You know, in
Right.
Europe they do, and it's a big track and they're used to that. But here in the States, 20 horses, it's you got to have tactical speed to get in the clear, to set yourself up, or you got to be dependent on the pace and hopefully get a trip that you're not behind the horses that are getting tired, and you're getting not only, you know, we're seeing some 4 and 5 horse field prep races. Now you're getting 20 where there's dirt in your face, mud, dirt, whatever it may be, and they're having to overcome traffic, the dirt in their face, and just a lot of adversity. So it's definitely going to be interesting going down the road.
There's two sure things in the Kentucky Derby that I've learned watching it for the past half a century. Okay. One is there's always a live figure horse that doesn't fire at all for whatever reason. Always. Every year there's somebody that just either the crowd, the track, whatever, just doesn't fire. And there's always a horse that had his chances compromised, usually more than one, but always that had his chances compromised, if not completely taken away due to traffic or somebody stopping right in front of him or just having no room. Those are the two sure things in the Kentucky Derby. Somebody's going to get somebody's not going to fire, and somebody's going to get a terrible trip. And hopefully neither one of us and nobody watching bet on either one of those
That's
horses.
it.
But
So
that's the sure thing.
Yeah, and so for the Preakness, you can check on tracking trips and you'll be ready.
Right, and we just put our announcement out for our Kentucky Derby seminar, which is going to be Thursday, whatever the day is that of that week. I'll put a link to that in the comments to this video. Every year we do a really nice Derby seminar. We'll be doing these Derby radar shows every week leading up to the Derby, following the contenders, the pretenders, all the news. We'll close with this. Newgate, like you said, off the trail, was a little disappointing. We're doing a year-long series on Frankie's fanfare year, Frankie Dettori. That probably would have been his mount for the Derby. Will he get another one? It's Frankie. He probably will. Ron Anderson's out there trying to get it for him, so he'll probably get another one. But it was nice knowing he had one. But I would love to see him get a ride in the Derby and on a live one as well. So that'll be a nice footnote to his career if he gets that mount and it's a live one. Because if it is, I mean, even at this stage of his last year, I think he's riding as good as he ever has. He's still in career form. You're out there in Santa Anita, you see him. He's winning just about every day.
He's in limited mounts. He's winning quite a bit. And the thing is, I don't know if he's just, wants to prove himself once again in the top circuit of Southern California, or he knows it's his last year, so he's going to give it everything he's got. But I mean, he's happy and cheerful and just loves winning. The other day did another flying dismount to show the crowd that he still got it. And it's good to watch. It's nice to see him be on a circuit that's covered, a lot of coverage, because riding in Europe, the people in the US don't get to see him as much unless you're trying to actively try to find him and watch those races in a different time zone and a different thing. But it's nice to see Frankie riding here. He's definitely got his foot in the door at Bob Baffert's. So I think good things could shake out. Now the interesting thing is, will he, if he had the Derby mount, would he ride in Europe or would he ride in Churchill Downs that day?
I think he'll ride in Churchill Downs if he's got a live Derby mount. I really do. It'll be very interesting to see. We had him on the show. We did a one-on-one interview with him. He was great. He's a great personality. And I think that him riding at Santa Anita and spending as much time in the States, a little bit at Gulfstream as well, I think is getting our races a little bit more exposure in Europe, because in Europe, over there in the UK, he's like a superstar, you know what I mean? So, he's got a tremendous following. He's a fan favorite. So I think he's getting our races a little bit more exposure. And let's close with this question, Jeff, because you've ridden horses, okay? You train horses, you ride in the morning now, you've actually ridden in races. Your son is a young exercise rider. So you have a unique inside perspective on this next question. How difficult is it when you get to be in your 50s, even being in shape, because we know guys like Mike Smith and Frankie Dettori are in phenomenal shape. There's other guys as well. But when you're in your 50s and you're out there race riding 1,000-pound horses against guys that are in their 20s, early 30s, they're in their peak physical athletic prime, and you're not, how difficult is it? And can you mentally and with your savvy of experience kind of compensate for that? Let's close with your take on that, because I think it's a fascinating part of our sport.
So, I love sports and especially horse racing. So I do watch a lot of these, like Michael Jordan, for instance. And, when you say Frankie's a superstar here, coming from Europe, it's like the Michael Jordan of horse racing over there. So the thing with these athletes like Mike Smith, Michael Jordan, is the mind still thinks they can do what they did at 20. But the thing is, now they've had the experience, and they are definitely what they might have lost, and they stay in top shape, like LeBron James, spends $1 million a year on his body to keep it in shape with therapies and everything, preventative stuff like that. So the same with these riders, they stay in tip-top shape, but it definitely, the mental game is not only do they've had so much experience, so much time in the saddle, that they can use their experience and their knowledge that can help balance that, the little bit of thing that they may be losing, muscle strength, timing, fitness. They really don't lose the timing because they do it all the time. But obviously with age, things start to slow down. But I think like these athletes, like Michael Jordan, he just maybe not be as strong as the next guy, but mentally and his knowledge of the sport, he was able to make the difference. And that's what I think with these riders is, so many times you see with jockeys, they really won't stop riding until they get injured, like badly injured. I mean, they come back from major injuries because their heart is still in it. They still want to do it. They'll die trying. I mean, I've seen guys literally almost die trying. And it's just one of those things where, you see in your interview with Frankie, it's hard for him to walk away, but he wants to do it on his own terms. And, Mike Smith is another one that like Tom Brady, I mean, they're in top shape. They're like, I don't have to go out and ride 8 races every day, but if I'm in good enough shape to ride some of the top horses and I ride 5, 6, 8 times a week, even if it's 1 or 2, but it's great horses, why not? And so, and he's often, Mike Smith, that is, called upon to say, you know what, we'd love you to ride this horse. You've been on so many good horses. We want to take your knowledge and, hey, can you tell us, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this horse? And he's had great horses to be able to compare it to. So I think that, Frankie's got some things on the other side that he told you about. So he's already got things that he can do after racing. So it's like Tom Brady, like they can't wait for him to get in the announcer's booth, but he still wants to play. And it's much like Frankie, it's like, hey, you've already, all these guys have got careers afterwards, like a lot of the football commentators. And, so they bring their knowledge that took them the last waning years of their career that they used to keep them in the game, because they got so much knowledge and so much talent that combination is lethal. And then they walk away and they're able to carry on that knowledge either through mentoring younger jockeys or through commentating and explaining what's happening in the situation. Like Jerry Bailey, very good example. He's a commentator and he tells you from the jockey's perspective. And, and that's where I think that, one thing about jockeys is they are almost indestructible, because these guys, they just keep coming back. They don't want to give it up if they don't have to. And, so I think it's that experience that can carry them much longer than in some sports. So, I think that their knowledge and experience definitely carries them longer than in many other sports.
Sounds good. Appreciate that insight. I think it's really good coming from you, who's not only a trainer, but somebody who's ridden and is around these guys you know, every morning and your whole career. And again, someone who's ridden and is athletic in their own right. So I think that's really good insight. We'll be back with another Past the Wire TV Derby Radar show next week. Hopefully we can get Jim Gazzelli to join us. He has a schedule issue this week. Hopefully it'll be the three of us next week and going forward. We've got our Derby seminar. We'll put a link to that in the comments. We're going to have great coverage all along. We've got the Frankie thing all year long that we'll be covering. A lot of great stuff coming on Past the Wire and Past the Wire TV. And Jeff, always a pleasure. Keep winning races. I'm watching you. You're winning and getting a little hot in Arizona there for a little bit and winning some races. Always great to see.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we'll try and keep it going. And I'm excited because, as you and I know, these Derby horses are like the Breeders' Cup, but it's the 3-year-olds. So we get to concentrate on the 3-year-olds now, and later in the year we get to concentrate on all the divisions with the Breeders' Cup. But no, excited because every week, like you said, it's changing for these Derby prospects, and it's exciting because they are so young to see that improvement, because they do improve fast and they improve by leaps and bounds. And as these connections know, you only get one shot at the Derby, the first Saturday in May of their 3-year-old year. And the other thing is that they get that one shot, and you see horses go from maiden races to stakes or even maiden wins to maybe possibly the Kentucky Derby.
Right. No, for sure. All right. Thank you everybody for watching. More Contenders and Pretenders coming next week. We'll recap the Risen Star as well, see if anybody else new emerges, and ciao for now.
Bye for now.
Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING, get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Nobody does it better.